everyone, it's Jerison. By now, the Vancouver International Film Festival that happened this year happened a month ago, and also the award season has officially begun, as we're probably now talking about which films could possibly get awards during award season this year. Which the film that could possibly get Best Picture, the camera this year, is probably a film that's probably not shown at the festival this year. So by the time I actually released this, apparently a lot of the films that I mentioned in this recap of the festival this year are released already, or are actually about to yet to be released, including Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, which of course the person that did the visual effects on the film was actually in attendance at the festival, and although by now it's actually not available on Netflix. And you also got Train Dreams, another film that's on Netflix, and Noah Baumbach's next film, J. Kelly, which all of them were actually going to be shown at the VIF Center on film, but in the case of J. Kelly, it will be also presented in digital. Now, I mean, also some films are may not be able to see outside of the festival, but they might come out at some point. And yes, so that. Let's look back at this year's Vancouver International Film Festival, which had a very fun time there. The 44th Annual Vancouver International Film Festival has been wrapped up, and it probably could create a lot of attention of the films that apparently got awards at the festival this year, as well as get a lot of people talking during the award season for next year. And I actually had a fun time, apparently, seeing the films at the festival, but also, meeting a lot of people. When I saw the films, plus also volunteer at the festival and talking with audience members about the festival and film. Now, for the festival this year, I mean, there were more venues and guests compared to previous years. For this year's edition of the festival, they added additional screen at the Cineplex International Village, where they added Cinema 7 now into the amount of theaters that are actually the festival is happening in, and also they added the Grand Island stage, which is usually the place where they show various plays and musicals, and now they're using it to show films too. Now I thought they were actually going to be doing it at the Emily's Carr School of Art, which is also within Grand Island, but some they're doing it at Grand Island stage. Plus, they also added a French heritage center, the Alliance Française, and they also did an indigenous slideshow at the H.R. Williams Space Center, which that'll be cool. I mean, it's kind of cinematic when you kind of have a light show too, at least. Now, while the festival was apparently a week, because back in the day they would usually do it for at least for 2 weeks, they could have did it a bit longer, but maybe for the same amount of time that they usually did back in the day. But at least the audience members would kind of engage at screenings, and also apparently maybe also allowed the general public to apparently go to the opening gala again, which they may not allowed the general public to go inside the opening gala for the festival this year. They've been doing that since last year's edition, but I mean, I think they might have did, but I mean, they could maybe for in the future at least. This year I saw 12 films in total, both my own time, and also I was volunteering, plus I also saw a few talks. And also saw a little a collection of short films where apparently some of the that made those short films were actually in person. And yeah, it's and it's some of these films apparently they were exciting, and also some of them they got mixed reviews on them, which of course with some of the films that were shown at the festival, they were showing a few films that were shown at the Cannes Film Festival this year, although of course many of the films that were shown at that festival this year apparently were divisive and kind of had mixed reviews, at least for the ones that I saw so far, which are like Wes Anderson's recent film, The Phoenician Scheme, which actually the producer of one of the producers of the film apparently did a talk at the festival, which we'll get to later, and then also I liked it. I mean, even though some people didn't like it, but also Ari Aster's recent film Edmonton, which for sure was very divisive, and apparently it was okay. But also apparently one of the many films that apparently that A24 released this year that are apparently kind of divisive. Well, including the first film that apparently I'm going to be talking about that I saw at the festival, which is, and actually some of these films might actually be released already in theaters. That they actually show these films just a few weeks before they are released in theaters, although some of these films might have been released in other countries before released in North America. And that film is Murray Brown Scenes If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, which has like Rose Byrne playing a therapist who apparently has to take care of her child who has this rare illness. But then also that apparently she kind of has like at the same time apparently like someone has to like check on her and her daughter's and also her husband's apartment, who was actually out of the city, which apparently like he's there's like a hole in their apartment. They actually have to stay in this hotel while it's being repaired, where she apparently like also meets a guy at the hotel played by Acid Rocky, which I was with all the people in this film. It was kind of interesting of who they put. Conan O'Brien playing the therapist is his boss, and going into the film, I wasn't expecting this to be a horror film, but apparently you could say it's kind of a horror film, although but at times would have some fun moments. But I mean, like, it still has moments that probably cringe and of course with the many things that that Rose Byrne's character apparently has. And all of it kind of all works out at the end. I mean, it's they have to go through a lot, and I mean, with everyone in this film, I mean, possibly Rose Byrne and Conan O'Brien could possibly get Academy Awards in this film. Although with the case of, let's say, with Rose Byrne, I mean, because I know as you probably saw her like in Role Models, apparently she does her thing in this film, and apparently, although she might be beaten by Sydney Sweeney, who was in another film that was from the festival, Chrissy. Now, the Canadian film that it probably was, actually a lot of people actually like, but are also like big fans of the show that the film involves. That would be like the film involves Nirvana the band, the show, with Nirvana the band, the show, and the movie, which. So originally it kind of began as like a web show, which then later would then be a show on Viceland, and then now we have the film. Which going into the film, I actually didn't see any of those. The web show and also the show before seeing this film. And now the film does have some references to the show, but apparently it may not affect like experiencing the film, which it was a great film at least. I mean, it was also epic for a film involving the show. Now the show kind of involves like Matt Johnson and Jim McCarroll, which Matt Johnson, you probably know, made the one of probably the greatest Canadian films in recent years with Blackberry, and then you also got and then Jim McCarroll, who's apparently a musician, I think, as well too. But he also did the score of, I think, the show as well, and also this film. So I mean, when you see the film, there are probably going to be like a lot of references to Canada in 2008, which if you kind of know about Canadian culture, probably will get the references in that. Although it does involve Back to the Future. Now, there might be a scene in the film that will probably not be in full media releases of the film. It does involve music. Although the film will be shown again at the Rio Theater later this fall with, of course, and Jay apparently in attendance, which, and then, now apparently this well, I'll probably get a Blu-ray release, but apparently on streaming will be probably on Crave. Now, to probably it might be like my favorite film at the festival this year, It's the documentary that talks about Marc Maron with Are We Good, where, of course, it follows him after his girlfriend, Lynn Shelton, passed away from a rare blood disease during the pandemic, but also goes through his career. And so apparently kind of about, like, Mark's relationship with Lynn, apparently so he first met her apparently when he was doing his podcast, the WTF podcast, which is about to end soon. And then apparently he kind of worked with him when he's like doing his show for IFC, where I kind of Marc Maron, which I kind of found out about him, and then also her on the show Glow, which apparently she directed a few episodes of both of those shows, and then also did some of his comedy specials. I mean, it was very informative, and then in the documentary, kind of follow him during the period after when after Lynn passed away, and he goes through during the pandemic, and then but then after he goes through all of that, when he does a comedy special for HBO, which you could probably watch that as kind of like a double feature with this documentary, which because they show a lot of things that Marc did for HBO and apparently the documentary, there's a potential that maybe they would apparently air this on HBO, which kind of makes sense. Before the film began, of course, there was an introduction by the head of the festival, Paul Fassner, apparently put a little discovered that the film does tackle on depression, and also that apparently during the Q&A that the director of the documentary and Marc would do later, apparently they would probably kind of ask some questions that wouldn't be distressing, but we'll get to that talk, the Q&A in just a moment. So then, apparently he's after when Marc goes through all of that, apparently he's actually doing very well right now, even though he's about to end his podcast, but as for what he's going to do next, we're going to have to wait and find out. So then after when they showed the documentary, apparently the director came back, as well as, and somehow Marc came into the theater at the front of the theater, and then they kind of talked about the making of the documentary, and then they answered a few questions, including a few from me, where I asked Marc that, because since he does a bit of Instagram lives, which you kind of see in the documentary, he kind of he would consider doing Twitch, and apparently he says no, but he said that he would probably still give his thoughts in some form in the future. Maybe he could do Twitch. But then I also asked both of them about if the director kind of sneaked in the shot in the documentary where when Marc's making the pie and then you kind of see his butt crack, and then Marc said something about oh, we should actually put that in because it would be the payoff, and that kind of works, which kind of makes actually documentary great as well. And then after that, and then also one was asking about the current state of comedy, and also about him being mentioned in recent news. Also about him ran into the various comedians performing at a comedy festival in Saudi Arabia, and then also one person told his story about almost committing suicide, but apparently Marc apparently inspired him to kind of doing what he likes to do. That would probably cause his him to live the life at his fullest. And also they also asked a question about during the press tour for the recent film of The Bad Guys 2, which he did say apparently that he said that the previous film was probably better than than this new one, which first I did say that the first one was probably better than this film, which apparently told him that as well. And then also we're not sure how they're gonna do with the story of that film series, which I'm sure we're probably gonna see the next one probably. Talked to Marc about Lynn, and I said well if she was still alive, maybe she would probably do a talk at the festival and then learn about her work. And Marc says something oh yeah, he would actually she would have did a talk at the festival, yeah. But yeah, and then after apparently he also went outside the theater at the front and he talked to the fans, and I thought I saw his his current girlfriend outside, but that may have been her. But and yeah, they also apparently like in the documentary he also mentions about he wants to move to Canada and we thought maybe he's going to possibly move to Quebec when he was performing at the Just for Laughs festival and like talked. And there was a scene in the documentary where he kind of talks about like what's oh yeah, like actually there's a process that could speed up him moving to Canada. But then he also apparently like he might possibly in Vancouver, which actually in the documentary, because in the documentary they also kind of mention like they interview various people that know Marc, and apparently John Mulaney's in it, and apparently he shouted at him too because he apparently mentions us in the documentary, which I mean he probably knows about us at least. And there in the little like Q&A as well, he also talked about him seeing Nate Bargatze at the Emmy Awards, which I mean they like each other's work, and apparently, and at first I mean Nate Bargatze did a great job hosting the awards here, even though there was a little problem with the like the thing where they apparently like if anyone that gets an Emmy award apparently goes over time, it probably would reduce the amount of money that would probably donate to the Boys and Girls Club of America, which although they still gave money, but it does question about how like if like famous people would donate to charity at least. What I saw was the film Renoir, directed by Chi Hayakawa, who also made the film Plan 75, which was a controversial film that talks about like but seniors in Japan committing suicide, which I think there was another film that was kind of similar to that, but except it was kind of wasn't in the form of a comedy, but also directed by one of David Cronenberg's children. And then, so I mean, like, so in this film it talks about a girl in Japan in the 1980s kind of dreaming during the summertime, and actually when at the beginning of the film I thought that, or maybe at the beginning of the film, the main person in the film apparently passes away, but apparently, and then the film is pretty much like going through her life, but apparently it's not that. But apparently, like after we saw the film, apparently some audience members were kind of confused of like what was happening. Although, if you going in, kind of, that the film talks about a girl in the summertime kind of dreaming, then you'll get the problem and get the context of the film. But I mean, it had some interesting moments. But I mean, like, although it did get very excited when they played like Yellow Magic Orchestra's Redine, when apparently during the scene when like the main person apparently like was summer camp, and her and her campmates are apparently like dancing around a campfire, and then the song is playing, and probably that song is probably getting a lot of hype in the past year, of course, with Yellow Magic Orchestra getting like the Lifetime Achievement Award Music Awards Japan this year. I mean, they even put that song like in the opening of the award show this year, and but also the song is dope. I first heard of it when I actually saw that group getting the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Japan Record Awards, and also apparently that the main person in the film might like girls. So then, like midway through the festival, then I also apparently saw a group of short films with a selection of short films that are apparently absurd and spiritual, and a few of them we can get to. Actually, all of them were kind of interesting in a sense. So in total, they showed like 6 short films with 4 of the directors of those short films apparently in attendance. The first one they showed was The Light of Immortality, directed by Matok Janik, where like also apparently the person that did the score of that short film, and apparently one of the producers of it also apparently was there too in attendance, and it talks about like actually it's more of a short documentary where he kind of like follows a guy who apparently is obsessed with old-fashioned lamps, and it kind of like it was interesting to watch, but also kind of learned about why he's obsessed with the lamps. But apparently the short film documentary apparently like someone was also a musician, and before he actually made this short doc, which apparently took a few years to make. But then there was one of 2 local short films in this collection with Tears Burn After by Natalie Morale, where like kind of like where a woman apparently goes back to like Japan. Well, when that happens, apparently she finds that her grandmother passed away, and then apparently she kind of along the way she kind of sees possibly her doppelganger, and that was a great short film. I mean, it was, but even they actually had there was a song too that apparently one, the person that plays like the person that like is in the bar that apparently the main person in the short film goes to, apparently as the singer, apparently that was actually not an actual song that actually made that song for the short film. And the parts of it were kind of also like have like the things you expect in the film by Nobuhiko Obayashi, which is kind of thing. And also apparently at the festival, although at the screen I went to, they were intense, but apparently a lot of the crew of that short film, as well as the people in it, apparently they made the short film with the local crew, and also as well as the crew in Japan too when they're making it. And then we have the other local documentary, My Dad is an Astronaut, directed by Bianca Rose Chong, where she kind of adapt this from a story that the director heard about, like a daughter trying to like find her father in space, and it also has a lot of infrared footage in it, which was I thought it kind of looked like it was animated, but actually that was like infrared footage. That was cool. Then there was this like animated short film they showed called Mother of Dawn, where like a hungry creature searches for food until then she eats this person, and he turns into the person that the person eats. And then there was Bleach, where it's where they kind of find out that a goat that they were going to sacrifice was a male, is actually a female. And then we have this short dog by Yui Young called Mojil, which talks about a female freediver who apparently gets the urchins and is about to apparently have dementia, so apparently she retires and apparently does this ritual. And interestingly, it ends with a Tony Bennett song with "I Lost My Heart in San Francisco," which when she was making the short documentary, apparently she actually she was like deciding which music to put in it. Apparently, her music supervisor told her, "Oh, maybe she should use this Tony Bennett song that kind of fits her story." And it was beautifully shot too, at least. So yeah. And apparently, during the Q&A, apparently she said that her next project is probably going to be a narrative film, where, and actually her future projects are probably going to involve fusion freedivers. And this next one she's going to do is apparently about a woman and a jellyfish. Who is a cinematographer, they've been working for at least like 4 decades, and worked with a variety of directors, including John Cassavetes, David Lynch, and Jim Jarmusch, which he's actually the cinematographer on a film that is also shown in the festival this year with Jim Jarmusch's next film, Father, Mother, Sister, Brother, which I did the cinematography on only like one of the 3 stories in the film, where the film kind of involves it's like an anthology where they follow 3 families in 3 different places, and probably kind of have tackling on generational conflict, which is kind of something that Yasujiro Ozu would do in his films, where apparently Jim Jarmusch was influenced by Yasujiro Ozu. And me and Frederick talked about that after the talk, which it was probably actually after seeing that talk, kind of want to see that more of Jim Jarmusch's films, as well as see his recent film. And also especially not, which is another anthology film he did, where it both involves people talking in taxis in different places, and him telling Frederick telling about how they made that film, where they have to stick onto the car, and then they're actually driving it, so they make sure that at the same time make sure that the shot is stable. And he also told stories about working with John Cassavetes, which actually I think one of his first major projects where he worked with him on Killer of a Chinese Bookie. And then he tells various stories about working with David Lynch, which when I asked him what was it like making the scene in Blue Velvet with a candy-colored clown they called the Sandman, he told me that making that scene was weird, and which I mean, the scene was kind of mind-blowing. Then after that, I saw the film that got the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival this year, which is it was just an accident, where it was pretty much another Palme d'Or winning film that kind of goes wild where apparently, so a guy who works at a garage apparently just kidnaps a guy, and then somehow it goes all wrong, and then like he gets some his relatives involved too, as well as a couple that apparently got married, and kind of similar to what happened with the film that got the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Festival last year, which would later get Best Picture, the camera with Sean Baker's Anora, where then the second half of the film was then kind of looking like a Safety Brothers film, which is kind of say this entire thing kind of might look like a Safety Brothers film, but at least it was interesting in the sense that it was shot. Had a lot of one-take scenes, but apparently most two. And then the ending, it's like maybe kind of questionable since it's but it might get people talking when the film is done. Back in Canada now with the film Wrong Husband, directed by Zacharias Knopf, who's probably one of the most famous directors in Canada. And it kind of related to the Cannes Film Festival. He got the Palme d'Or for probably his most famous film, Antonin John the Fast Runner, which we'll talk more about then when we get to the talk about that he did at the festival too. Now, apparently this film got Best Canadian Feature at the Toronto International Film Festival, which there's a public chance that this film might get Best Film at the Canadian Screen Awards this year. Now, apparently according to Zacharias, he said that the film is kind of based on a true story in his home province of Nunavut, where apparently it talks about about a couple that was supposed to have that was involved in an arranged marriage, but then when and when initially thought that the husband apparently was somehow killed up by a troll, I think, but somehow she married the wrong husband when actually the original husband came back, and then it kind of gets into some interesting fighting scenes. Mainly they're actually doing wrestling, but it wasn't a fun. And it was, at least for a Canadian film, it was epic, and with the score, which sounds epic too. But it also does go to some mythical and some historic details of, let's say, Nunavut in the early days, in which apparently with many of the people in the film, they're actually from Zacharias' hometown, and they apparently, for some of the people in it, they actually have to learn some wrestling from the stunt coordinator of the film, who also plays the troll in the film. He actually told me about this at the talk that he does later, but I mean, maybe it's as epic as Atanajot, which, but we'll eventually see that. We'll actually, let's say that when we see this film too. It currently doesn't have a distributor yet, but it will probably release in theaters. They might show it at the Fifth Center again. But they'll probably put it on a streaming service at some point. Now, but kind of with talks, then after that I saw the talk with Jeremy Dawson, who's a local producer from Vancouver, which actually when I went to the talk, I thought I actually just found out about that he's actually from Vancouver. But actually, I actually found out early when I found out about the talk. Now, Jeremy Dawson apparently worked on many films, including the films of Darren Aronofsky and Wes Anderson, which of course he was one of the producers on his recent film, The Phoenician Scheme. But he's also a producer on Darren Aronofsky's recent film, Caught Stealing, which that kind of makes me want to watch that film for sure. I mean, that film got mixed reviews, but it could be a fun ride when you see it. Now, apparently there's some connection with me and Jeremy, because before he got into filmmaking, apparently he did political science classes before he got a career in photography, which apparently actually did that in college before I actually did before I actually did journalism at BCIT. And then when he got into photography, apparently he would later meet Darren Aronofsky. And since he found out that apparently he knows how to use Photoshop, he was asked to do the open titles of Darren's first film, Pi, where he also worked where he apparently did he also did some of the little text scripts that apparently are seen when the main person in that film kind of types on the computer. And he also kind of tells this very interesting story about how they had to put that scene from the computer, and then they have to print out every frame of that opening title sequence, and then they have to shoot it on the film, and then they present it on the film, which I'm not sure for like the 4K remaster, which A24 did recently on it. Apparently, they might have got it with the original files, and then he also worked a bit on the special effects on his follow-up, Requiem for a Dream, which also got recently like released in 4K, and then also and how his collaboration with Wes Anderson began is actually he worked on The Life of Claudia in the case of film's animation, where he's kind of had more like in a producing role because I know Harry Selznick did the animation on that film. And surprisingly, also Wes himself actually recorded a video specifically for the talk about like what does a producer do, and then I mean, like, because the last time he had this something for Viz when he recorded like a special message for that was shown at the beginning of his films when when the Viv Center was doing a retrospective on his films, and I mean, so I was also surprised when I saw that message, and then have Wes kind of doing a message for the talk. Apparently, like it shows that maybe Wes Anderson is probably aware about Viv, and then maybe I should kind of. Just if he actually did a talk at the festival sometime in the future. Then and then since then he would work with him on some of his films, including also Fantastic Mr. Fox, especially on special effects, where apparently he also is seen in the film playing Mr. Beaver's like son. And then while he was working on the Grand Budapest Hotel, which can considered as like Wes Anderson's like greatest film, though for me it's probably gonna be the Royal Tenenbaums. Apparently, the scene in the film where apparently when Gustav and Zero kind of sledding through the mountains, apparently casing J.J. couplings, apparently they apparently made that scene in a parking lot in Berlin, and they also apparently instead of using a film camera, they actually used the red camera to kind of actually film all that. Which I mean, of course, in French Dispatch, apparently there was a scene in the film that would use animation, which was probably like digital. But for the sled scene in Budapest Hotel, apparently they had to they shot that on a red digital camera. So now we go to one of two films directed by Richard Linklater that will actually be released this fall. With actually one of them apparently already released and limited released. But I mean, and that was also this film was also the opening film at the festival this year, and also was shown at the Cannes Film Festival. That film is the film that talks about the French New Wave with Nouvelle Vague, which I think it's yet to be released here soon, although it might have been released in France. But with these two films he released, this one might be more appealing to international audience, while the other film he made, Blue Moon, which we'll get to in a moment, is more focused on, let's say, for the North American audience. And they do have similar kind of themes where they of course, was one of the main themes of Richard Linklater's films, where he calls about time, where with Nouvelle Vague, it takes place over a period of, let's say, over a period of at least a month, while in the case of Blue Moon, where apparently it takes place throughout the period of an evening, which we'll get to more about that when we get to that film. In the film, it talks about about the making of the film that would cause the French movie to go mainstream with Breathless, which was probably innovative at its time. And although, of course, Anne Varda was probably the one that invented the French movie, but then Francois Truffaut would start to get some attention with The 400 Blows, but then the French New Wave in general would get more mainstream when Jean-Luc Godard makes Breathless, which we could describe as probably as a more efficient way to make a low budget film, and it kind of shows when they make the film, and then but later this film would be as a cult classic, and that would also put the people that were involved on the map. And before they all did that, apparently they were all critics at the film magazine Cahiers du Cinéma, where first the filmmaking kind of also be classified as critiques of films that were probably released around the time they were making films, and apparently it's another way to present a film, which kind of involves breaking the rules, and also apparently it can actually all work out, but something could be a bit unusual at times, and also can cause things to be choppy. Well, I mean, you kind of notice that when you see the film Breathless, kind of sense. But the one scene where they're in the car, and then John Paul Miranda's character says variety of things that just cuts like every few seconds when he says something that's kind of important, which you kind of see what led to that decision, like in the film too. So, yeah, and then but you also see other in the film. You also see like some of those other prominent figures in the French New Wave. You also see like Agnes Varda. You see Jean Paul, like Pierre Melville. You can see Roberto Rossellini too, and as well as Agnes Varda's husband, Jacques Demy. Which the Jacques Demy in this film, it kind of doesn't look like him, but I mean, it kind of looks like him. I mean, I thought that Zoe Deschanel was in this film, but actually it might have been another person playing Jane Sieber, which it might have been the same person that was in the Pitch Perfect film series, I think, playing Jane Sieber with Christina, yeah. And then, I mean, it was an interesting film that was presented in the style of the film. There was also, it was filmed with the same equipment that was used to make it, which they were using a camera that was kind of similar to an Arriflex, but they also shot it on like Illiford film, which is like movie film apparently used to shoot pictures, and then which was kind of like what made the film kind of cost efficient. But I mean, it allowed them to kind of do some handheld camera work and also hide the cameras, because at the time this type of filmmaking didn't exist. So it kind of might be, because when people might be suspicious, they kind of see the camera being there, but even when they were filming the movie, people thought that what was happening was actually happening, but actually it's they're making a move. But there are also like a lot of scenes in the film that were like kind of like the thing you would probably see in a film that's made by Wes Anderson, kind of like this. And Richard could make another movie about Jean-Luc Godard. Maybe more about his relationship with Francois Truffaut, who also was seen in the film. The film does begin with like Jean-Luc Godard currently watching The 400 Blows when it was premiering at the Cannes Film Festival, and also throughout the film there were kind of references to like what Jean-Luc Godard would do later on in his career. He would he mentioned a musical that apparently is not a musical, which would be A Woman is a Woman, which has like this maybe his soon-to-be wife, Anna Karina, and then also he said he's going to like Panama to shoot this one film, which will probably be Contempt, and then they also mentioned other ideas that would later on be films. So then after that, I kind of saw the talk with Zachary Canuck, where he apparently taught a lot of stories about life in Nunavut and stories about the Inuit being told. But after the talk, I asked him like if he would consider doing a 4K master of Atarnajat, which he says yes, they are currently now set for its 20th anniversary, and found out that film was actually made on Betamax tapes, which even though it was first shown in theaters, was shown on film, which so it's gonna be like, and this is because the Betamax was like high quality. I'm not sure if this will be like maybe like as sharp as, let's say, a 4K master, but I mean, like, it might be a 2K master then upscaled. We'll have to inform about that. And then a few films from Japan that I also saw, apparently that one of them is actually Sekai Paradise, where it follows an actor named Kazunari Yadagatani and his friend going back to their hometown of Osaka while he's about to be married. Now for this film, Keiko Soroka apparently wrote, directed, edited, and did the cinematography of the film, which one of her known films, which was also shown at the festival in the past year, was Takir Lacquer Girl, where Shimura maybe only like wrote and directed, but she didn't do the editing and cinematography part. And this one was kind of about also kind of like a little documentary kind of style filmmaking, in the sense that somehow like at least with the beginning of the film, where it shows a person making tofu, and it was kind of sort of something like Sean Baker did when he was making Takeout. And then, well, most of the film is scripted. Apparently, parts of it are unscripted. Like apparently, there's like one scene where like where the two main people apparently talk to, I think, like Kusanari's grandfather, and then there's also a scene where they're at a barbecue, and then when they go to a festival, which all those scenes were probably like improvised, and then apparently the two main people in the film were actually also from Sakai. That there was a chance that Kazunori might have had some involvement with the writing, even though like Keiko wrote the film, but maybe she consulted with him maybe when they were like for making it. And actually, Kazunori is actually so an actual actor who's apparently is trying to have a career in Tokyo, and then yeah, and actually also like so apparently of course the director and Kazunari as well as the person that plays his friend in the film, Haruyuki Nagami, were also were there in attendance, as well as the assistant producer. So I think apparently translated for all of them, and then like and apparently for and apparently because the film is also going to be shown at the Tokyo International Film Festival later this this month, which apparently this is his first time actually having a film at that festival, which and for Keiko apparently this is her second time apparently coming to the festival, which as at least for right now in Japan it hasn't no production company is releasing the film yet, but it's yet to be released in these theaters in Japan. Might come back here possibly and at some point. Then I saw Kokuho, which is apparently a surprise hit in Japan this year, but also it's like it might get best film at the Japan Academy Awards here, which apparently where it follows was like a kabuki actor getting adopted by a famous kabuki actor. Apparently, after like somehow his family was somehow shot by the Yakuza, I think, after a party where he and his like another guy apparently were doing a little play, but apparently I think he also adopted his sister too, which and then it follows like his career from that point up to at least could say present day, where a lot of things happened in that time period, where at the same time kind of like trying to probably preserve like the history of his adoptive family, as well as too, and like then they also have kind of like his connections with samurai, I think, which it was an epic film because it was now it was based on a book, but I thought this was also kind of based on a true story, but may not be based on a true story, but it was sort of similar to a Christopher Nolan film, especially Oppenheimer, where with the score, where apparently like has also kind of like it has that thing where it kind of goes back and forth between scenes when like something like happens, which kind of thing, and then and apparently this was a film that the person that made the film saying apparently like it was actually like a kind of like a passion project, and then you got like also Ken Watanabe playing the kabuki actor that adopts Kokuho. But I think also the person that was in Godzilla Minus One maybe in this film. I thought Mizuki Mashita was in this film, but she's not it, because if she was in the film, there's no reason she might have did sexy time in this film, which it's kind of interesting because in North America it's going to be released by G Kids, which although they did release Perfect Blue, which is also rated R, this one for sure will probably be rated R. And it's kind of also why it's also kind of similar to Oppenheimer, because there's also sexy time in that film too. Now, a thing that I kind of learned from seeing the film is that it shows that the Kabuki families are kind of like real family. And before seeing this film, I kind of got an idea of Kabuki and like some of like the famous plays that were but also the theaters where they kind of happened. Which actually they might have shot the film in actually some of these famous theaters actually in Japan. Which I would like to go and sign one of them. Probably to go to, let's say, to Japan again. And what else? Now, for its international release, because when they show the plays that are seen in the film, they kind of like they would show the title of the play, but for its international release, they would show like context, which because for those who have not know about the movie will kind of find out what the play was talking about. Because I actually learned all about Kabuki when I watched the show on NHK World, Kabuki Cool, which and I kind of recognize the plays that were seen in the film. It's but yeah, it's really, at least it was probably really great film. It probably might get Best International Feature at the Academy Awards next year, which, or I mean, they might also give it was just an accident, but I mean, like, I'd be surprised if Kuho gets it, and then like, and finally, then I saw the other film that Richard looked at me that was from the festival here with Blue Moon, where it talks about like Lawrence Hart, who was a person that worked with Richard Rodgers before apparently Richard Rodgers would later work with Oscar Hammerstein. And the film takes place throughout, like, on, like, the opening night of, like, one of Rodgers and Hammerstein's series musicals, Oklahoma, where kind of, like, doesn't like the musical, and he kind of wants to work with Richard Rodgers again. And the entire film is kind of like him, kind of ranting about his relationship and, like, kind of talking about Broadway at times, but also meeting a lot of people at the restaurant where apparently they do a party for Oklahoma's opening night, where we would later see Richard Rodgers in again. And apparently Lawrence Hart is played by Ethan Hawke, who apparently works with Richard Linklater. And also you got Andrew Scott, who you probably know from like Sherlock and Fleabag and All of Us Strangers, and also and the Macy's version of Ripley, apparently playing Richard Rodgers, and you also got Margaret Qualley playing like Lawrence's like girlfriend at the time, which now it kind of had like a little play vibe in it, but I mean like I guess it's if you're kind of like used to these types of like one location films, and you probably enjoy this. No, I mean, Ethan Hawke might get an Academy Award for Best Actor this year, but I mean, we'll have to see what happens with all the other films that are released this year. The other thing I saw when volunteering at the festival, I saw the documentary Factory, which talks about a Lanola factory during like the early days of the outbreak that would lead to the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, it did show the many problems in China, but also apparently that it also mentioned a similar documentary with the Netflix documentary American Factory, produced by Barack Obama, which kind of has similar topic, and except that takes place in the United States. But I mean, some people told me that apparently the film was a bit too long, but apparently it was one interesting scene in the film where you see the workers in the factory kind of like working while music's being played, and it kind of does make that's impactful. But and I also saw this other documentary called Marriage Cops, where it talks about a group of wedding counselors apparently being cops to kind of settle like marriage disputes, and also maybe to kind of help them get through their marriage, and also maybe actually not get divorced. Which, and we thought that some of it would be resolved, but it somehow it may not actually been resolved. But I mean, at least showing these types of cops is probably an interesting documentary to see. And just after recorded that video, the winners of the awards in the Vancouver International Film Festival this year were announced. And a lot of noticeable films apparently got awards, and even some of the highly anticipated films apparently got awards as well too. For the summer award, the Canadian film The Things You Kill apparently got that award. A local BC film, Blue Heron, got a few awards, including the Horizon Award, as well as the Arbutus Award. Also, the luge documentary The Track got the Tides Award. While the short film No Skate got the Short Form Award. And for the Vanguard Award, that went to Wind Talk to Me. And for the Audience Awards, probably like one of the surprise hits in Japan this year, Kokuho got the Audience Award for the special presentations. Well, for the showcase films that went to In the Room, the Panorama section went to Meadowlarks, the Vanguard section went to Gazelle. Another local BC film, Akashi, got the Northern Lights Awards, which could be more promising for the film. It might get more attention possibly in the next year. Freeler Pelche got the Audience Award for the Insight films. Khartoum got the Audience Award for the Spectrum films. Well, for the portrait films, The Essence of Eva got that award. F-Toys got the Audience Award for the for the Altered State films. For the Spotlight on Korea series, the film 3670, which talks about a North Korean deflector living in South Korea, got the Audience Award for that series. And for the focus section of the festival, the film Bad Girl got that award. And with that is what happened at the Vancouver International Film Festival here, which, again, I probably had a very fun time and surprisingly saw a lot of people, especially Marc Maron, which, he was a cool guy to talk to as well, too, and, met one of the greatest Canadian directors of all time with Zachary Canuck, and also, met, Friedrich Elms, famous cinematographer, and local producer Jeremy Dawson, which were all kind of very informative, and also like great people to talk to about film, at least too. And with the films I saw, I'm probably going to be talking about probably the next few months during award season. And then hopefully next year, maybe also bring more venue, maybe more guests to the festival, maybe more talks. Maybe also allow the general public to apparently go to the opening gala again. But if you really enjoyed this little recap of the International Film Festival series, you could probably like this video, subscribe to my channel where I'll talk more about film. And with that, I'm Jason. I'm sure I'll see you later. Bye, everyone.